Hello.
Hello? Who is this?
Who's there?
You should never say who's there. Don't you watch scary movies? It's a death wish.
What's going on, everyone? Now that we've established the fact that I'd die if I found myself in a Scream movie, we're going to establish whether or not each of the characters who do find themselves dead could have lived. Today we're looking at 1996's Scream, the first installment in the series. With iconic lines, plot twists, and post-traumatic stress, this is sure to be a frightfully good time. Before we jump into the kills, let's meet the lovely and not so lovely folks who will be the focus of our attention. The film follows Sidney and her friends, including her boyfriend Billy, Tatum, Randy, and Tatum's boyfriend Stu. Tatum's brother, Dewey, is the deputy sheriff of their town, Woodsboro, and he's kind of into Gale Weathers, a tabloid reporter. Sidney's mother and father were not in a happy relationship, and her mother had several affairs, after which she was killed. The events of the film take place a year after her death, and Sidney has testified that one of the men who slept with her mom had killed her. But everything comes into question when a ghost-faced killer terrorizes her. The first of the opening scene deaths occur at 8 minutes in with Casey's boyfriend, Steve, who was beaten up, tied to a chair, and then disemboweled by one of the ghost-faced killers. One of the killers, who is on the phone with Casey at the time, claims that Steve was killed because Casey answered a trivia question incorrectly. I highly doubt this, and believe that Steve would have eventually been killed regardless. Later on in the film, the killers even say that if you get the question right, you die, and if you get it wrong, you also die, turning away from Casey's actions as they probably didn't really affect Steve's death. Steve himself wasn't in much of a position to do anything, as he was tied to a chair. He could have tried knocking the chair over to break free, but that would have been risky as he was close to a pool and could have accidentally drowned himself. Additionally, that sort of commotion would have alerted the killers. However, he could have potentially made a more subtle escape. From a shot of his dead body, we can see his wrist wrapped in duct tape, but not attached to the handle of the chair. Whether or not this was a mistake on the part of the filmmakers, having a free hand would have allowed him to tear the rest of the duct tape on his legs. But if he were able to pull that off, more questions would arise involving where Ghostface was at the moment, if he would notice, and so on. Because of this, I'm going to go ahead and say that Steve's death is slated. Our second opening scene death occurs at 13 minutes in with Casey. After a short chase and a tragic moment in which her parents fail to notice her calls for help, Casey is stabbed and hanged by Ghostface. This scene did not do her justice. It isn't entirely pathetic, as we are shown that Casey is formidable and is able to fight the killer off on occasion, but when the chase parts of her death sequence occur, this girl is doing a power walk, at best. She also stops on occasion to look at her parents' car, which makes no sense at all. There were no signs of injury earlier in the scene that would provide a reason for her to move so slowly, and she clearly was in the mind space and had the capability to fight off the killer. I'm absolutely under the impression that she could have run slightly faster and garnered the attention of her parents. Even if she hadn't moved faster, her parents absolutely should have noticed her. While they were having a conversation with each other, the outdoor lights were on and Casey was moving. That should have been enough for them to glance around at the very least. But if the movement wasn't enough, Casey could have thrown the phone in her hand to get her parents' attention, since she had just been choked and couldn't scream. While Casey's death has become iconic for horror opening scenes, I believe she could have lived. Next, at 53 minutes in, Principal Himbry is stabbed to death by Ghostface. After school ends for the day and is cancelled until further notice due to the recent attacks, Himbry hears a noise and becomes paranoid. He searches the offices around him and even the cabinet in his office, but he doesn't check behind the door, and when he closes the door, the killer strikes. His death is super pathetic. While he's taken by surprise, he never seems to recover from the shock he is in, as he does nothing but scream while being stabbed. In an earlier scene, we see Principal Himbry use a pair of scissors quite skillfully to threaten students who had been making jokes of Casey and Steve, so we know that he is at least capable of fighting back. Furthermore, when he is stabbed, he is pushed against his desk, which is covered in useful objects, including the scissors that he has proven himself to be skilled with. While I understand the shock he was in, he was searching for the hiding killer, so I believe that he could have been in the mind space to grab the scissors, or any other object on his desk for that matter, and use them to fend off the killer. Because of this, I'm going to say that Principal Himbry could have lived. Sidney's best friend Tatum is next at 1 hour 7 minutes in, and my goodness, she does literally everything I would have thought for her to do. During a party at Stu's house, Tatum is sent to the garage to grab a few more beers. Once inside the garage, the door to the house shuts. And when she first realizes the door from the garage to the house is locked, she opens the garage doors to enter the house from outside, which makes perfect sense. Unfortunately for her, right before she can duck under the garage door, the ghost face killer presses the button and it begins to close. Thinking it's one of her friends playing a prank, she delivers the iconic, "Oh, you wanna play psycho killer?" and asks if she can be the helpless victim. While she ends up being a victim, she's far from helpless as she slams the garage fridge door in the killer's face and throws glass bottles at him. Things take a turn for the worse for Tatum when she tries to escape by crawling through the cat door. I understand her thought process here, as when I saw the cat door, I thought to do the same thing. And while it may have been a dumb idea, she didn't have many options of escape, and it absolutely could have worked. She just needed more time than she had. Once she is partly through the cat door, Ghostface presses the button to open the garage door and she's lifted up and crushed by the roof. While she possibly could have tried to straighten out her body more and slip out of the cat door before getting crushed, I'm under the impression that this was just a difficult situation to get out of. She was likely disoriented by the moving of the door and the position that her body was in, especially since she had one arm outside of the cat door and one arm inside, and she had fought hard in the garage. Because of this, I'm going to say that Tatum's death is slated. Next, at 1 hour 24 minutes in, Gale's cameraman Kenny has his throat slit by the killer. This comes right after Sidney is chased by the killer and runs out to the camera van to get help. The two see the killer behind Randy thanks to a camera Gale had planted in the house, but when Kenny sees the house's front door open, he remembers that there is a 30-second delay and the killer may no longer be with Randy. Right after this realization, his throat is slit and he dies. Because of how sudden the situation is and how few opportunities Kenny has, I'm going to say there's nothing he could have done, and his death is slated. Up next is Stu, who dies at 1 hour 40 minutes in after Sidney pushes a television on top of him and he is electrocuted. At this point in the film, it has been revealed that Stu and Billy had been working together and are both Ghostface. It is also revealed that the two of them had killed Sidney's mom the year prior, as one of the men that she had an affair with was Billy's father, and after learning of the affair, his mother left them. They plan to frame Sidney's dad for everything, but when Gale enters the house, they're distracted and she escapes. She turns the tables and calls them with the voice modulator that they use to call her. Then she fights back. During this fight, she is pinned down by Stu, but bites his hand and smashes a vase over his head to get him on the ground. Then she pushes the television on his face and he is electrocuted to death. While there was some time where Stu could have moved to avoid the television, I think he was too hysteric, and quite frankly weak at that point to do much of anything. Stu and Billy are psychopaths, with Stu having a much higher energy appearance than Billy. Because of this, he is incredibly hyped up by the chase and likely isn't thinking sharply. Furthermore, he and Billy had been stabbing each other to push the narrative that they were left for dead by Sidney's father, but survived, and Billy stabbed Stu a bit too much, so he was rather weak, leaving his death slated. Our final death comes at 1 hour 42 minutes in as Sidney shoots Billy through the head. Now, the odds are absolutely against Billy here. While focused on attacking Sidney, he is shot by Gale, and I do not believe there is anything he could have done in that moment to prevent that. He just didn't see her coming. However, a few minutes earlier, he had the opportunity to and was going to shoot Gale dead, but he was distracted by Stu exclaiming that Sidney had disappeared. Instead of quickly finishing her off and going to help Stu, Billy leaves Gale alive. I find this to be a bit strange as Billy has shown himself to be more outwardly aggressive while also being more reserved than Stu was. If he had shot Gale when he intended to, he would have had a much higher chance of stabbing Sidney to death. But there would have been a lot of other factors to consider, such as if or how Sidney would have continued to fight back, and if Randy, who was still alive, would have helped Sidney. After Gale shoots him, he really stands no chance, and there is nothing he could have done to prevent Sidney from shooting him dead. Because of this, I'm going to say that his death is slated. All in all, Scream leaves us with 7 kills. Of the dead, 5 were slated and 2 could have lived. While Ghostface is a regular person with a regular knife, there are 2 of them, which gives them major advantages in manipulating and killing victims as well as concealing their actions from the public. Anyways, thank you all for watching today's video. If you have any thoughts to add or movies you'd like me to take a look at next, leave a comment below. Also, please consider leaving a like and subscribe to support me. As always, be good people, love others, and love yourselves. Peace.